Good morning and welcome to a Friday morning edition of Coffee with Rich. And due to Will's schedule, it's going to be Emerging Threats Friday for the month of November. And good morning, Will.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing better than you are, sir.
It's warmer there. It's snowing outside for me.
Is it really?
It is. Yeah, it won't last, but it's snowing.
No, it is not snowing here. It is a beautiful, majestic East Tennessee morning. And welcome to those that would join us today on Coffee with Rich and Will. This Emerging Threats Friday. People have said, Will, that we should call it Eye Candy Friday when you and I are both on here. I'm not sure about that.
You know, it's hard to argue with that kind of logic, really.
That's true. It is. Let's talk about some sponsors here, Will. We got
All right.
amazing sponsors like the Cool Fire Trainer. Cool Fire Trainer, every single day I'm asked again and again and again about the Cool Fire Trainer. Yes, it truly is an amazing product.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome, America, for the Cool Fire Trainer, because it's going to take your dry fire game to the next level. Why dry fire when you can cool fire? Dry fire is almost like, that's so 20th century. You want to move into the 21st century, get yourself a Cool Fire Trainer. It's your gun, your grip panel, your beaver tail, whatever it is you've got fancy on that gun, that apex trigger. It's all your gun. All you got to do is replace the barrel and the recoil spring to get felt recoil and take your training game to the next level. Please check out Cool Fire Trainer. The easiest way, I've said that every single Friday and Monday, the easiest way to go and see our sponsors and get the deep discounts is go to theamericanwarriorshow.com, guys. On the right-hand side of the page, you'll see the links that'll take you right to our sponsors, and you can use the discount codes available to you for watching this morning's show. Mountain Man Medical, guys, you're far more likely to use your trauma kit than you are that G26 crammed down your pants. So please check out the trauma kits that we have co-branded with Mountain Man Medical. Brian McLaughlin over there will train you on how to use all the products. You can get virtual training and a trauma kit for what it costs to take a family of 5 out to dinner right now. You can also check out Precision Holsters. Precision Holsters, makers of the Ultra Appendix rig that I'm currently wearing, as well as the tactical belt. They also finally have a competition line for those of you that are USPSA and IDPA shooters. Please check out precisionholsters.com. We also have apphemp.com, which is Appalachian Standard. My good friend Jesse Ross and his amazing family are growing some. And I wish every viewer of Coffee with the Rich could check out their farm, Will, because it is absolutely beautiful. And they are growing some of the finest CBD products. They do everything. They grow the product and they produce the tincture and the salves all in-house. And they are true artisan hemp craft growers, man. I'm not working this morning. Please check out Appalachian Standard. Will, you want to welcome some folks onto the show this morning?
Yeah, I see Alan Kelly is there now from Free, Virginia. Congratulations to him and all the good patriots out there. We're glad to see that election went that way. TC Fuller's on. And John Shriver there from Oklahoma. I'll be down there in a few weeks.
Yeah, and Guile is on from the Philippines. Jeff Foley is on, coin number 1687. And I guess we should talk about the American Warrior Society as being one of the sponsors of what we're doing here, Will. You know, the American Warrior Society, Mike Seeklander and I started it, I guess back in 2015. And it has everything you need to protect you and your family in the coming times that we are facing right now. You want to learn about less lethal stun guns, pepper sprays. You want to learn how to retain your firearm in an entangled fight. Heck, you want to go from white belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to blue belt. We got everything in there. Rifle, handgun, shotguns, vehicle tactics, you name it, how to clear your home if you come home from vacation at Disney World like I did, Will, and the back door standing wide open. You may want to clear that structure before you just do-si-do on in the house, you know?
Absolutely. I know I've learned a ton. That's how I first found you guys when it was you and Mike on the podcast. That's I tripped across you guys. My coin number is 426. So
wow.
So I've learned a ton from you guys.
Well, thank you, brother. And I'm drinking out of my Hilliard Police Department mug. I was up there with a good friend of mine who's also a coin member. Shout out to you, Doug. I won't give away your last name since you work there, but God bless you and all the brave men and women in law enforcement that are walking that thin blue line, keeping us safe every day. We absolutely love you here.
Protects us from the other side of society. Lets me put my kids to bed and not worry so much.
Amen. So, well, I guess we'll get into today's show. We got 18 folks on. Please like and hit that share button. We're going to talk about emerging threats, kind of pick up where Will left off. Will took us through, I guess, from colonial America right up until what, 1914?
Yep. Signing the Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah. So the Federal Reserve Act gets signed, I believe, in 1913. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's kind of where we're going to pick up with today. We're going to talk about the U.S. economy and some of the things you may need to know and may have future relevance. So we're going to start around 1913 and take it all the way up to World War II. So without much further ado, man, I guess we can talk about how when World War I happened, the U.S. was in the midst of a recession. It had been going on for about a year and 11 months. You're looking at business activity in the United States had fallen by almost 26%. Industrial and trade activity had fallen by about 20%. So we were in some pretty rough times. And thank God something called World War I come rolling along, because it, as we will see, provided a significant financial incentive to America. Why? Because first, it unleashes massive federal spending, because we have to account for the nation that has to shift production from civilian goods to war goods. And also between 1914 and 1918, we added some 3 million men and women into the government, whether that's in uniform or out of uniform. But so you got people coming onto the government payroll, and we go off to France and fight World War I, and we win, Will.
Awesome. That's a good thing.
It was a good thing. But of course, you got the Treaty of Versailles. I think that was signed November the 11th, 1911, where we get Veterans Day today, actually, is from the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I. So how did all these peace treaties end up? How did they affect the world economy? Well, it seriously hurt the British economy, the French and the Germans, specifically, obviously, the Germans, because they were the losers in this. And the cycle of war debt and reparations caused European economy to become dependent on the United States. Now, why did it become dependent on the United States? Because there was a vicious slosh of money going back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean, because the American bankers had lent all this money to Germany to pay its war reparations to the allies like France and Great Britain. And then France and Great Britain in turn had to repay their war debt to the U.S. So the U.S. is that's why they call it the Roaring Twenties, right?
There was a lot of money sloshing around.
Yeah. So, but Germany, it realizes, God, if I keep printing money to the extent that I have to in order to pay off these reparations, it's going to have significant long-term economic impact. I mean, they weren't stupid. They realized the problem that was coming. So in 1923, 22, they default on their loan payments to France and Belgium. So do you think that old France and Belgium took that laying down?
I'm guessing they weren't too happy about that.
No, they weren't. Let's welcome some folks on here. We got Mr. Mike Seeklander appears to be on. Says, good morning, folks. Please share. We got 19 folks viewing us so far. This is a little history lesson on the U.S. economy from 1914 to World War II. We're going to talk about how some of the things that happened then will affect us in the future, potentially. And Dr. Fuller says, Rich, didn't you get your first case of trench foot on the Marne? Yeah. I don't think it wasn't the Marne. It was actually in the Philippines, and it was not good. Trench foot is an ugly thing. Google some pictures of trench foot, man. It'll keep you up at night. Pretty rough stuff.
Doesn't sound like fun.
No. Suffice it to say, it is not fun. By the way, if you're just joining us, my name is Rich Brown. I'm the co-host, co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, America's leading self-defense podcast. And you're watching Coffee with Rich. And I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, corrections officer, special operations officer. And I'm joined by my good friend, the esteemed Will Wood. Will, you want to tell them about yourself?
I'm an airline pilot for a major U.S. carrier. Your basic news and economics geek. I love researching this stuff. I love looking into it. Been flying airplanes for, I started when I was 12. So 40 plus years now, and love to spend my free time shooting, doing a little jiu-jitsu, spending some time on the lake.
And there you go. And you're going. I didn't hear anything about your bios that said you had a master's in economics, and you're correct.
Yep. Nope, sure don't.
Nope.
Just apply a little common sense and a little research.
That is true. And the reason why a couple of self-defense guys are looking into this stuff is because, we have micro threats to ourselves and our family. And then we have macro threats to ourselves and our family, these external conditions that could wreak havoc in the future. And so that's what we're trying to do, let you know about some of the issues that are out there. So we're back. It's 1923. And Germany says, guys, I can't pay the war reparations to the tune that you want. I just can't do it. I'm going to destroy my economy. So what happens is the French and Belgium says, okay, no problem. I'm going to send 60,000 troops into your industrial region, which is the RUHR, the rural region. I don't know how you pronounce that.
I believe
And we're going to go ahead and we're going to extract the money because we're going to take over the key industries and natural resources in this region until we get our money back. So Germany tells their workers, hey, man, do not work for these clowns. Go on strike. It's okay. We're going to pay you. We're going to keep paying you, even though you're sitting at home on your rear end, and don't worry about it. So what happens with this, Will? Well, as you might imagine, German goods become even more difficult to get, even more scarce, and thus even more expensive. So to pay off their war reparations, to pay the striking workers, the government again has to start printing more money. And this also gets the French and Belgian troops out. But guess what it does?
Hyperinflation?
Bingo. It collapses the German economy. Now, as we talked about last April when I did the first show on economic collapse, and there's different ways the economy can collapse. One of them is through hyperinflation. If you recall the historic reasons. Now, some economics will twaddle over what exactly causes it. But from the research that I've been able to do, there's three basic causes for hyperinflation. One is a weak economy. Two is large government debt. And three, uncontrolled increase in the money supply. And I would, again, since we're looking at historical references for what may happen in the future, Will, let me say those three things again that could lead to hyperinflation. Weak economy. Does that sound like us?
Yeah.
Okay. How about large government debt?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How about $29 trillion? Does that sound large government debt?
It sounds pretty big. Yeah. I think it's more than $100.
And an uncontrolled increase in money supply.
How much the money supply was printed in 2020 again? There's a trivia question for you. Do you know?
Go for it.
25% of all dollars, digital and physical, in existence were printed or digitally printed in the calendar year 2020.
That should keep you up at night, folks. So during the German hyperinflation, the German mark to the American dollar plummeted from around 32.9 to 1. So the exchange rate was 32.9 German marks will get you $1 to 433 billion German marks would get you $1 by 1924 alone.
That's
so we're
crazy.
Talking about, I'm sure if you graphed it, it's a hockey stick. It just,
Oh yeah. And a couple of things I'd like to throw in there, Rich, if I could. The Germans printed money for a long time before hyperinflation kicked in. So when I hear people here in the U.S., say, "Oh, it can't happen here. It hasn't happened yet." Well, it happens slowly and then all at once. And that's exactly what happened in Germany. They printed money like crazy for 6 or 7 years before the hyperinflation kicked in, because inflation and hyperinflation are different, but the human psychology behind them is the same. And that is if, as a society, we believe higher prices are coming, we're going to go out and spend our money now and acquire those goods. And it becomes that self-licking ice cream cone.
That's exactly right. And Robert says, printing money to pay workers to not produce leads to bad things. Sounds very familiar.
It sadly does. Yes. Yeah. Hey, I got one other thing I'll throw in there for you. In the research I was doing leading up to this, there isn't a book definition of hyperinflation that I could find, at least. If somebody has it, throw it in there. I wasn't able to track one down, but a commonly accepted number I did run across in numerous places was 50% inflation per month.
That's
for a
right.
month. So I was trying to wrap my small little brain around that. So I started off with a pizza. So let's just say you spent $20 on a pizza in January, one pizza, and 50% monthly inflation on that. By December of that same year, that's a $1,700 pizza.
Wow.
And wages never keep up with inflation. It just doesn't happen. Because inflation is a backward looking metric, and your pay raises have to look into the future. And if you go tell your boss, hey, I want a 50% raise every month, he's going to turn you in for a drug test.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Alan Kelly says, and Biden wants to shut down another pipeline that will even affect Canada, but put more strain on our economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Hey, that reminds me of something else I've heard that I can't remember his name, but it was a German entrepreneur, business owner, and he saw this coming, and he purchased large quantities of coal, gasoline, oil with the Deutschmark prior to hyperinflation. And then when it hyperinflated, he'd borrowed money as well, went into margin to do this, which is a high risk thing, not suggesting anybody do that. But he did that. And then when hyperinflation hit, it held its value. He was able to sell that for the higher price and pay off his bank notes on that were at a fixed rate and denominated in the cheaper or more valuable Deutschmarks.
genius. And it takes a lot of courage to do those kind of things because, as Mike Seeklander, who's on this morning's shooting performance, says, sounds like doom is coming, but what are practical solutions other than finding a tall building? And go ahead.
I was just gonna say what I'm doing is I'm trying to stock up on stuff we use. Normally I keep between a quarter and a side of beef in the house in the freezer, and I got a family of 5 with 3 teenagers that eat me out of house and home. So I just upped that. I just bought another freezer, and I'm just gonna, because as buy it now, vacuum sealed. It's good for at least 9 months to a year in the freezer. We're gonna go through it, trying to do whatever I can to purchase things that I know I'll use in the future. And if the price if it goes the other way and the price goes down, I might kick myself a little bit. But if I don't do it, I'm going to kick myself a lot.
Yeah, and Dr. Fuller says Hugo Steins was the German fellow Will was referencing.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, TC.
Yeah, and Ted says looks like I picked a bad time to be on a fixed income and stop sniffing glue. I love the people that watch this show, man. I absolutely love you people.
Got my same sick, twisted sense of humor. I love it.
I know. I love it. Will is on, says, good morning, Rich. Good morning, Will. So glad to have you on the show. So let's continue on. So we talked about Germany's going through hyperinflation in the early 1920s. We talked about kind of the things that led to that. But what's going on in America in the late 20s? We had this little thing called the Great Depression. Perhaps you heard of it.
I think once or twice.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's funny how the Great Depression influenced my grandparents, perhaps yours, and many of ours on the show, right? Because it changed them in a way and made them act in a certain way. Like my Mima, for example. And Mima, if you're not from the South, is a Scottish word for mother. But my Mima, my grandmother, she kept everything. I mean, she would, because she understood that there was value in everything, whether it was keeping the tin foil or my grandfather, would use Borton snuff and it came in these glass containers. That's what they drank out of. Old dish towels became when screens you could put on your window. They kept everything. We may be entering that soon.
I think we're going to be here at some point. I really fear for our children. And it'll be rough on us because it takes a number of years for this to happen. It'll be a little rougher on us. We'll be a little bit older, but we're also getting prepared for it. They're going to be entering, at least my children who are teenagers, are really going to be entering the working world as this is really taking hold.
Yeah. So if you came here this morning looking for like, okay, Will and Rich are going to talk about what caused the Great Depression, really, former Fed Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke once said that the Great Depression here in America was the holy grail of macroeconomics because it's so hard to understand what exactly was the causal factor or, of course, factors that led to this. Even though this is Obviously, this is established historical fact. There's still books being written about this every single day, trying to understand exactly what happened, right?
Yep. Yep. And it's going on all the time. And you know, you were giving me grief earlier about not having a master's in economics, but I think that's part of the problem is that these people, they're incredibly intelligent, so they think there has to be a complex reason for these things. If we look at these phones, the beauty of them is the simplicity, right? There's like 3 buttons on them. I mean, so just because they're real smart can figure out that there's complex reasons behind things doesn't mean the root cause was really complex. Like you said, they printed a bunch of money and it was sloshing around everywhere.
Yeah, and you said something earlier I wanted to hit on, and this is something that I talked about last April when I did the first show on economic collapse. Please go back and watch that. And that is something called the Tinkerbell effect. And it sounds like, really?
What'd you call me?
The Tinkerbell effect. And that is that, if you remember the Peter Pan kids movie Disney put out, I guess back in the 60s, if we all believe, then Tinkerbell will live, or something like that.
Yep.
Well, this is how fiat currency works. It's just how the dollars in your pocket function. There's nothing backing those dollars. You can't eat those dollars. We only believe those dollars have value because we believe those dollars have value. And the minute we stop believing, because like you said, Will, if you wake up in the morning and know that the money in my pocket right now is going to lose 50% of its value by the end of the day or the end of the month, then you're going to want to spend that and turn it into real assets as fast as you possibly can, correct?
Absolutely.
So the minute that Tinkerbell we don't believe it anymore as a collective American conscience, then it has no value and it's worthless. And that's where, just creating money out of thin air too rapidly, too quickly can have long-term disastrous consequences.
Yeah. And, something you just said there, as long as we all agree it has value. You remember the Cabbage Patch Kids back in the 80s?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody had to have one. There were, news reports on parents fighting in the aisles of KB toys over Cabbage Patch Kids. Well, it was something everybody believed had value, right? But as soon as that Christmas season was over, or the following one, whatever it was, it no longer had value and you couldn't give one away.
Beanie Babies in the late 1990s.
Yep.
Tulips in the 1700s in the Netherlands. I mean, the world is replete with these examples. I mean, you don't have to look far to see them. So let's talk about the Great Depression just really quickly. So the Great Depression, the duration is probably roughly around 4 years, and peak unemployment raged to probably 25%. 25% unemployment. It may not sound like, well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. That's enough to wreck an economy.
Absolutely.
GDP, gross domestic product, fell by almost 30%. And so Roosevelt comes in and he says, if you elect me, I'm going to launch a suite of programs, not a sweet group of but an entire plethora of programs called the New Deal. And it's going to get us out of this thing called the Great Depression. So many of these things I really didn't know until I started looking into this. Things created under the New Deal are things that today we take for granted, like the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is the FIDC, which insures your money, and the Social Security system. These were all New Deal programs, as was the creation of standards for minimum wage and hours on the job. These are all created by Roosevelt.
Yep.
So I guess we owe him quite a bit. Dr. Fuller says, and now 9mm ammo. Yeah, 9mm ammo. You might want to go get some, folks. It'll be worth its weight in gold. Jesse is on, says, good morning, gentlemen from Michigan. Coin number 2221. Of course, if you want to find out what a coin number is, you're going to have to check out the AmericanWarriorSociety.com to find out if becoming a member of our society is the right thing for you and your family. So let's talk about gold. Because one of the things that Roosevelt did was kind of, I'm going to say wage war on gold, but that's not really true. Upon taking office in 1933, he issues a series of executive orders. The one that we're going to talk about briefly is Executive Order 6102, enacted April the 5th, 1933, which would forbid the hoarding of gold coins. And he did it under the authority of the Trading of the Enemies Act of 1917. So he reaches back into World War I and pulls out this Trading with the Enemy Act and says, hey, look, man, if I catch you hoarding gold, I'm going to treat you as an enemy of the United States. So here's what you better do. You better turn in all your gold. As a matter of fact, you brought this up to me last night. He actually said, I'm going to look in your safety deposit boxes to make sure there's no gold.
Yep. That was part of the enforcement of that executive order, was if a person went and opened their safety deposit box, there had to be a bank official watching. And if there was gold in there, it was immediately confiscated.
And oh, by the way, you don't want to turn your gold in. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw your rear end in prison for 5 to 10 years and fine you $10,000, which in 1930s during the Depression might as well have been $1 million.
Yeah. Yep.
What a lot of historians don't know is that even the foreign companies that had gold assets here within the borders of the United States had their gold seized. There was a Swiss company. That had over $1.5 million worth of gold coins that they just kept as a reserve here in the U.S. Well, the U.S. government seized them and paid them back in U.S. dollars in fiat currency. And of course, the Swiss government, they tried to sue the United States to get their money back, and the U.S. went, "No, I gave you dollars. You're welcome."
That's the same value, right?
Yeah. Now, the stated reason for this executive order was that hard times the Depression had caused people to start hoarding gold, and this in turn slowed economic growth and worsened the Depression. So that's why he got us off the gold standard. But Roosevelt's main rationale for doing that was to remove the constraint on the Federal Reserve, which at the time could not increase the money supply unless it had 40% of all the Federal Reserve notes were backed by gold bullion sitting there. So by the late 1920s, the Federal Reserve had almost reached the limit of the allowable credit, and it needed to do something else. So in stepped Roosevelt with his executive order 6102, and he sweeps in all this gold. Now, he doesn't just seize it and give Americans nothing. He gives them $20.67 per ounce of gold. So I have a 1 ounce gold coin here. I don't know if you can see it. This right now is worth a little over $2,000.
Yeah.
When I show people this, it's like, that's $2,000. This is $2,000, folks. This 1/4 ounce gold coin is worth over $500.
Yep.
So in 2020 money, the amount that Roosevelt gave Americans for this was equivalent to about $413 for that. So he kind of.
So what you're saying is the dollar hasn't really held its value? Is that what you're saying?
The dollar has not held its value.
One of the examples I like to use if I'm talking to someone about this, because I'm the life of the party with stuff like that, is that 1 ounce gold coin in 1925, 1927, you could go out and buy a good tailored suit with that. In 2021, you can go buy a good tailored suit with that 1 ounce gold coin. It's just that it's going to cost you a couple grand instead of $20.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the same thing can be said for togas. They went back. I read a book on the gold standard. It's like, the 1 ounce gold coin in the Roman times could get you a nice toga, which is the same thing that you're saying now with regard to a nice suit. Got 24 folks on. Will Joseph is on says morning from Vermont. David says the spirit of Woodrow Wilson will govern this depression. Yeah. Ted says, in my view, Americans now entitled and cannot tolerate what my grandparents endured: outhouses, well water, gardening, paying taxes, by working on roads. Yeah. Johnny King says, good morning from Kentucky.
Boy, Ted really hit that one on the nose. I mean, think about what our grandparents went through. My grandparents were both born in 1925 and have since passed on. What they put up with as young children, 4 and 5 years old, when the Great Depression hit. Look what our society does. If somebody says the wrong word, and
Oh my God,
there's no way our society is ready for real hardship.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, you're exactly right. It used to be sticks and stones will break my bones. Words will never hurt me. Yeah. Now it's flopped around there.
Yeah, sure has.
So Roosevelt says, I'm going to give you, for every ounce of gold I collect from you, I'm going to give you $20.67 for that ounce of gold. And so people turn in their thing. That's during the Depression. They need the money. They get some cash to put in their pocket. And then Roosevelt, once he collects all the money, he raises the price of an ounce of gold from $20.67 to $35 an ounce. So what this did was it incentivized gold miners to go back and start working. It expanded the production of, it allowed foreigners to export their gold to the United States because they want to get that $35 an ounce.
Mhm.
And it simultaneously devalued the US dollar by increasing inflation. Now, why in the heck would he want to devalue the US dollar during the Depression?
Did he
Because
want to? Did he want to put a bunch of dollars out there in circulation?
he did, because you think about it, the Depression means I want to hold on to my money. I don't want to go buy that new refrigerator, even though it's on the clink, because I don't know if I'm going to have my job. I don't know what this money is going to be worth. Let me hold on to it. He wanted to increase the money supply, devalue the currency a little bit, and have a little bit of inflation so people start spending their money. So here's one of the things. I think the Fed is really good about the levers that the Fed can pull with the money supply is really good about stopping a recession, stagflation, depression. It has those tools. My concern is I haven't heard or seen any real evidence that shows me the tools that the Fed has at its disposal can stop runaway inflation. Are you familiar with that, Will?
No, I mean the closest we got is when a couple shows down the road here when we talk about the 70s with the high inflation during that time, they were able to do it through interest rates, but it caused a great deal of pain at that time. Um, the problem is that they had the levers they can pull and they can quickly, as we saw during the pandemic, they can quickly invigorate the economy. But slowing the economy down, getting rid of inflation is a whole lot harder than getting rid of deflation or stagflation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So thank you to the 28 folks that are joining us right now. So traditional beliefs about the recovery from the Great Depression hold that the growth was due to the physical policy of the United States participation in World War II. So kind of that World War II got us out of it.
Mhm.
But Friedman and Schwartz claim that the rapid growth of money stock in 3 successive years from June 1933 to 1936 was a consequence of the gold inflow produced by the revaluation of gold plus the flight of capital to the United States. So just like I just said a second ago, you had all this gold coming into the country to gobble up that $35 an ounce, put more money in the economy, and we saw interest rates increase. We saw a little bit of inflation, and it ended the Depression. So this, just to hammer on this one more time. So the reevaluation of gold was his way of devaluing the dollar, and the consequences we've seen really helped. So the limitation on gold ownership in the United States wasn't repealed until President Gerald Ford in the 1970s signed a bill legalizing private ownership of gold coins, bars, certificates, and went into effect December the 31st of 1974. So up until then, man, you couldn't have them.
Yeah, and that's crazy when we think about that now. The government completely, essentially outlawing what we now consider just another asset class, precious metals. That it's crazy when we think about it. The confiscation is crazy. When I tell people about that, they're like, "No way, that couldn't happen." I'm like, "Well, bear in mind that's the same president that interred the Japanese."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it just we think it's not possible, but there's precedent for that.
Yeah, and of course the precedent for that led to the Korematsu decision, which said that the president could, during times of national emergency, take you American citizens based on their race, religion, whatever, and lock them up.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
it is absolutely insane. So, do we want to talk a little bit about hyperinflation, some forms of money? I know that we
Yeah.
said we would talk about that.
Yeah, we got a little show and tell here. I don't know if you know this, Rich, but there's Elon Musk, there's Bill Gates, and then there's me.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't like to brag, but I am a trillionaire. Look at this right
look
here.
at that,
Look at that. Oh,
man.
just hide that Zimbabwe part. See that?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
$10 trillion.
10
Look at that.
trillion, huh? Well, let's see.
Yeah, look at that.
There's Bill Gates, there's Elon Musk, there's Will Wood, and then there's Rich Brown.
Oh man.
Rich Brown's 100 trillionaire.
Ah,
That's
just when
real.
I thought I was making it, man.
That's real Zimbabwean money, folks. That was
Yeah.
real legal tender. And
Yep.
here's the thing. So if this was still real, before Zimbabwe entered their hyperinflation period in 2008, 2009, if you go back a few years prior to that, Zimbabwean money was $1.25 to American money. So at that same exchange rate, if this was still legal tender, it would be worth all the money in the world multiple times over. This
Wow.
one piece of paper. But of
And that's
course,
Zimbabwe is an interesting case study because it was, as usual with hyperinflation, it's irresponsible leadership printing money like crazy. But it started off with a famine, and farmers unable to get the I'll say artificial fertilizer, commercially made fertilizer versus cow dung. And so the president of Zimbabwe, whose name escapes me at this point,
Robert
uh,
Mugabe.
thank you, just started printing Zimbabwe dollars so that they could buy fertilizer from Europe.
But it's actually worse than that. He
Okay.
enacted something called the Land Reform Act,
Oh, that's right.
which was part of the reason that they entered into hyperinflation. So what that meant was he seized the land of white farm owners and gave it to something called the war veterans, who were blacks who fought for ZANU and ZIPRA during the Bush War in the 1970s. So he says, hey, look at these white farmers over here. And I'm not putting a racial spin on it. This is just what he did. He's the racist, not me. I'm just telling you what he did. But white farmers, he seized their land, gave it to black Zimbabweans, not white Zimbabweans, because they were born and raised there. Those white farmers seized their land, gave them pennies on the dollar. They ran off to South Africa and started farming again. And those people that were given the farm, you know what they did in many cases?
What'd they do?
They ripped up the irrigation pipes and sold it off for scrap.
So another example of someone who didn't earn something and then doesn't value it.
Bingo. It's human nature, man. They sold off certain things, the tractors and the livestock and all this stuff, took what they could and ran off.
So they felt rich for a little while.
Bingo. But what it did was, and now why is anybody going to invest in Zimbabwe if they realize that the government can just go in and seize land? So I show you this to say, this is what, before the country of Zimbabwe, it was that country called Rhodesia. Those who may remember it. This is an actual $2 Rhodesia note issued in 1976. And at the time, this was worth more than U.S. currency because Rhodesia was killing it in the economy. So here again, same country, same arable land, same people, everything's the same. And yet this country was prosperous. Robert Mugabe comes in. He enacts some terrible economic policies. He realizes, I got my own printing press. I can print whatever I want. Yep. And look what happens, folks, when you print whatever you want.
Yep. It really goes to show that as you said, it's the same arable land, demonstrably the same people, the same population, and monetary policy can absolutely rip a country apart.
Yeah, it can absolutely destroy it. Just for a little bit of context, this $100 trillion note at the time that when it was finally thrown in the trash and scrapped would get you one bus fare in Harare, which is the capital city of Zimbabwe.
I know I've read anecdotes of when the inflation was ripping in Zimbabwe, when it was well into hyperinflation, when families would go shopping, we think we fill our cart up, go to the front, pay, go home. They would actually pick an item off the shelf and send one of the kids up to pay for it. Otherwise, by the time they got up front, it would cost more.
Yeah. And these countries do a lot of wacky things to try to stop it. Venezuela does this thing where they take your, whatever they call their social security number, and let's say mine ends in a 1. Let's pretend. So Rich and Will, if your social security number ends in a 1, you can only shop on Monday. You can only spend your money on Monday. That's it.
Okay.
Because they don't want people during hyperinflation, they run out, want to spend. So another thing so they try this. They also try the idea of you cannot get any more than $200 out of the ATM a day, which is why any country experiencing hyperinflation, you'll see long queues at the ATM trying to get money out, because they got to get that money out and then give it to a runner and have them go run out and spend that money. You'll also see people for miles lined up at the gas pumps before the gas stations open because they want to fill their tanks, because at the end of the day, the currency is going to be more worthless than it already is.
So instead of being productive members of society, we worry about extracting maximum value from worthless pieces of paper with pictures and numbers on it.
That's right. And it's funny. It's one of those things where, well, Rich, what you're doing is you're talking about fiat currency. We get it. It really has no value. It's currency that's breathed into life and created. But things like this, a quarter ounce gold coin that's worth almost $600 right now. And every time I tell somebody that, they're like, "You got to be kidding me, man." No, that shows you what your money's really worth when you see that right there is worth $600. But if you look at the fall of the Roman Empire, this is a Roman coin minted around 300 AD. And one of the reasons why Rome fell was they're paying off the barbarians not to sack Rome, not to run in there, the Visigoths and others. They're paying all these bribes to people, and they're debasing their currency. So back when this was bronze and gold and silver, they were debasing the currency. When I think at the turn of the I think in the 100 AD, Roman silver coins had about 90% plus of silver. By the time Rome fell, it had less than 10% silver. That's their version of money printing.
Yep. And let's put that in perspective for the US for the show I'm going to do next week, where we'll be going. I think I was going to suggest we run up through about 1971 when the gold window gets closed. Used to be silver, or our silver coins, quarters, dimes, nickels, half dollars as well, were 90% silver. And then they were 40% silver. And now I don't know how much silver's in there, but it isn't much. And for years, pennies have cost more to make than what a penny is worth.
Yeah.
History may not repeat, but it sure rhymes.
So what Will's talking about, this right here is issued by the United States Mint. And in this is a roll of real silver dollars. They're just worth $1, but they're actually got about each one of these coins inside here has about $30 worth of silver. And that's today. If hyperinflation takes off, this might be worth, instead of several $100s, this might be worth $1 million as our currency goes.
And going back to what Mike Seeklander brought up earlier on what's a practical solution. Well, for me, not financial advice. Everybody do their own thing. I like to diversify. I've got some silver like you just showed there. I've got some gold just like you showed. I keep a little cash around just in case. Have a little bit of everything. I'm in the stock market as well, so you got to diversify around, and that's how you get prepared, because those silver coins you just held up, it might be worth X number of dollars, whatever we put on it. More importantly, could be worth a side of beef.
Yeah. So, and like you're saying, Will, same thing here. I'm in the stock market. The only thing I'm not in is crypto. And I read a book on it, and Dave Brothers mentioned, what about Bitcoin as a solution? I think it could be, but I wouldn't go all in. I would make it part of my portfolio. I think
I'm a big crypto advocate. I've been in crypto. Okay, this is the part where I kick myself. I first thought about buying Bitcoin at 300.
Oof.
Yeah, I procrastinated and put that off, and then kind of forgot about it. I could be retired right now. I could be Rich Brown. I could be a multi-trillionaire. I'm a fan of crypto, but you have to be responsible. Because we don't know what's going to happen. That whole Bitcoin crypto thing could be a whole nother show down the road.
It could be. And I think that you need to put that show together, because I read the Bitcoin Standard, which is an incredible book. If those of you that are out there haven't read it, I read it to inform myself about it. I came away believing that it is certainly a way that, let me back up. So one of the things, this is going to play into something that Jeff asked. He says, during the time in Zimbabwe, what was some of the lawless actions? Well, as people were running out of Zimbabwe and trying to get into South Africa, one of the things that Robert Mugabe, the president, did was, I'm not going to let you leave this country with anything more than $2,000. So if you sold your ranch in Zimbabwe and you had, millions of Zimbabwean dollars. No, you can only leave the country with 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that people were doing is turning that money into gold South African rand and hiding it in their tires and doing all this other stuff. But with crypto, you could literally put it on a thumb drive
Mm-hmm.
and then hide the thumb drive wherever you need to hide it on your body to get out
Uh-huh.
of the country. And that way you have your currency, or you put it in a cloud and you walk across the border and then
Yep.
pull it down.
Yep, and that's with the you don't even have to actually have to have the USB drive. There's because I just did this recently. It's called cold storage, where you take it off of the service you're using, whether it be Gemini, Binance, Coinbase, and you download the keys for it onto the USB drive. And there's specific USB drives made for this, and it comes with a 24-word password. And you memorize those 24 words in order, you can go anywhere in the world and download your crypto.
Yeah, of course. The danger of something like crypto is something like the Carrington event, solar
Mhm.
flare, EMP.
Yep.
I mean, if the electrical grid goes, the
Mhm.
value of the crypto could just
Yep.
plummet.
Absolutely.
Which again is why, like Will is saying, diversify, folks. Don't put it all in crypto.
Yep.
There's some
And
really,
is it oh good. Is it Tony there?
yes,
TNY? Is that Tony?
Tony.
You know, he brings up a good point about property too. We know what housing prices have done in the last couple years with all the money printing. Yep. And they're gonna try and put the brakes on that, but probably as usual with the Federal Reserve, they're probably going to overshoot it. And but again, be diversified. I own my home, and I also have a little piece of land I put a gun range on. So try to get diversified across as many different asset classes as possible.
That's exactly true. Ted says governments do not like competition on who makes currency. Saying I use solar panels to mine crypto does sound cool. Yes, it
Yeah,
does. That's what you do, Ted. That is really cool.
yeah, it is. Um,
So
so
diversify. This right here is about $1,000 worth of silver. It's a real silver bar, folks. But it is not the only thing that we're doing here
mhm.
on the farm. We, like you said, Will, we've paid off the farm. We don't owe any money on it. But again, it's like, don't think that a mortgage in hyperinflation is necessarily a bad thing.
Mhm.
You could wipe out your mortgage
Yep.
quick if
Yes, and
prices go through the roof.
that's actually one of the strategies I've been looking at is people even doesn't even really take hyperinflation, just periods of high inflation. A lot of debt can get wiped out. And my own theory is there are those within banking and government. I'm trying to be very careful here. That would love to see short period of sustained inflation to wipe out a lot of this government debt that's been racked up. You see, it can get wiped out real fast. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, who gets hurt most are your wage earners, especially low income and lower middle class. They get absolutely crushed by the price increases because the positions they're holding in society, the wages don't increase fast enough to keep up.
Yeah, Tony says that this is always the scary part for me. He says you may
Mhm.
own your home, but you rent the land it sits on from the government, and
Very true.
that is very true and very disturbing at the same time. And which is why I live in Tennessee, where the property taxes are some of the lowest in the country. I think we're number 36 on the list. I think New Jersey is number
Mhm.
one, where it costs, for a quarter acre of land, it may cost you $10,000 or more a year
Mhm.
just to have that land. And what happens in hyperinflation, if you can't keep up with that, you could lose
Mhm.
your land.
Yep. And that's, people are surprised when, with all my talk about, Bitcoin, Ethereum, gold, silver, all these things, they're surprised when they hear I hold a fair amount of cash. Well, my property taxes are pretty much fixed. I mean, yeah, they can increase as Tony brings up for sure. But because of the societal pressure, they're not going to increase nearly as fast as inflation. So it's relatively a fixed cost. So your fixed dollars sitting in cash, physical cash, will offset that to a large extent.
hmm And what happens when Zimbabwe's currency finally collapsed? Well, during the hyperinflation of Zimbabwe, 80% or more of the Zimbabwean economy was on the black market because
Mhm.
they realized that this money was worthless and they started using other currencies like the South African rand, the US dollar. So when the currency finally did collapse, they just went to the US dollar. And I think they have come off of that now. And I say all that because this right here was legal tender. This is right here is a Hollandia coin from 1779. And this was what we were using here in the United States for currency. So we were using foreign currency here in the United States right up until the Coinage Act of 1792. So for those that think the US dollar is immutable, it has been and always will be, that is just not true.
Yep. It's just another asset class, and it'll come and go just like all the rest of them.
That's right. Any questions from folks watching this morning? Will, do you have anything else that we should discuss this morning?
No, I think that pretty much covers what we wanted to hit. I'm thinking next time around I'll pick it up and we'll take it from the end of World War II. We'll get into Bread and Woods and take it through the 50s and Vietnam War, Great Society, and the closing of the gold window by Nixon in 71.
Yeah. So again, hopefully we've given you a lot of things to think about. Historical context is always important because context is king, man. One bit of information in isolation really doesn't mean anything. I mean, right after World War II, in Hungary, you had actually worse hyperinflation than you did in Zimbabwe. They issued a million billion, I think it was a million billion or 100 million billion pango note. The currency was the pango. And what's interesting is at the end of their hyperinflation, Will, if you would have opened up, had every Hungarian citizen empty their pockets and pile up the money, open up every bank vault, push it into this giant Himalayan-sized mountain of million billion pango notes, you would have, add up all the currency in Hungary, it would be equal to 1/10 of one US penny.
Holy cow. That's
a
unreal.
destruction. The destruction of a country right there. So don't think it can't happen here, folks. I'm sure if you ask the people in Hungary if it could happen to them, they absolutely would not believe it. So watch out.
Yeah. Hey, I see William Province here asked what was the name of that Bitcoin book you talked about there, Rich?
The Bitcoin Standard. Let me see if I can get you the name of it. Well, the name of it is the Bitcoin Standard, but who authored it?
Yeah, I'm about a third of the way through that book after you mentioned it on the last show.
Yeah, I think it's really good because it talks about gold and all the other forms of currency before it gets into the Bitcoin at the end of the book. And the Bitcoin Standard, the decentralized alternative to central banking. Outstanding book. Highly recommend it. Anything else, Will?
No, I think that'll do it, Rich.
All right, brother. Why don't you close us out?
All right. Hey, everybody. You already know it. The fight's coming. Be ready.